Hey guys, Jim here again, coming at you with another live virtual adventures program. Again from the Intrepid Sea, Air and Space Museum, located in the heart of Hell's Kitchen in Midtown Manhattan, New York City. Again, another free Adventures Live program. This doesn't come without a cost, so if you would like to support this free programming and keep it flowing, please check out or consider supporting us by clicking one of the links in the chat below. Right? Also, feel free to say hi in the chat. Let us know where you're tuning in from and who you are. And if you've been to the Intrepid Museum, we love to hear those kind of stories, and just say hi in the chat as well. Okay. Now, today's program is Journey to Space, and we're going to be taking a look at Intrepid's connection to the space race in space exploration and beyond. But first, a little about the Intrepid. So, if you think you know what kind of a ship this was or is, just tell us in the chat. Just let us know as a little reminder what kind of ship it was. This is, of course, as it appears today, sitting in the Hudson River at the very end of Pier 86, in the moored to the pier. So if you can tell us what kind of ship that is or was, say so in the chat. Let's see, it's pretty big. In fact, it's about 913 feet long. If you asked Intrepid to do a headstand on its bow, it would stand almost as tall as the Chrysler Building. So it would be skyscraper length, or height, I should say. If you're thinking that this was an aircraft carrier, you would be absolutely correct. Okay, it was, of course, an aircraft carrier well before it became a museum. And the Intrepid served in World War II, in the Cold War, and in the Vietnam War. And it served a very important role in the space race, which is what we're going to be talking about today and focusing on. Intrepid would be decommissioned in 1974, and it became a museum like you see in the picture here, and like you may have visited in 1982. Right? But why have an aircraft carrier? Well, if you think you know the answer to that question, then also write it down in the chat as well, okay? This is a picture from its service in World War II, and you see a lot of stuff on top of it. Those are probably aircraft, but why do you think we needed an aircraft carrier, specifically in World War II? But even today, we continue to need aircraft carriers. If you have any idea, say hello and tell me in the chat. If you're thinking that a lot of the warplanes that we used and a lot of the planes that we use in our national defense are incapable of flying clear across an ocean, well, then that is the absolutely correct reason. Okay, so we needed a place that a shorter range aircraft could use as a landing pad, someplace to land, get refueled, and take off again. So that is what the whole purpose of an aircraft carrier is all about. Okay, it's a floating airport. Everything that airports on land, maybe a lot of you have been to airports, everything that we have on land airports, we had and have today, again, on aircraft carriers today. Okay, so again, we are calling from, or I am broadcasting from, the Intrepid Sea, Air and Space Museum. Now, you can probably guess why we're a sea museum. Well, we used to be a ship. You probably can guess why we are an air museum, because of all those aircraft that we had on board. Yep, you got it. Hello there to Vash Sin. Nice to have you join us again. But why are we a space museum? Why do you think we have that last part, our last part of our mission, a space museum? If you think you can guess, and I kind of hinted at it before with Intrepid's important role in the space race, put it down in the chat. I'd like to see what ideas you guys always come up with. Lots of brilliant people out there. So if you're thinking that the Intrepid was a recovery vessel for space missions, then you absolutely were correct. Okay, so Intrepid had a very important part to play in the space race. The space race was a symptom of the Cold War. Now, I like to use that word symptom. Cold War, of course, is a war that you're not shooting at each other. But just in case you do, you want to get a lot of knowledge about that other country before you do actually turn it into a hot war, and hopefully that never comes. And several symptoms, like the space race. Now, I want you to think of a race. Maybe some of you run in races. Maybe some of you walk in races. Maybe you're like me and you cycle a lot and you join races that way. Think about a race, or maybe you just watched them like in the Olympics this summer, like I did as well. Think about racing and think about what the goal is on a race. Okay. Now you start a race at a starting line, and how do you know you've ended the race? And more importantly, how do you know you've ended the race successfully? Put it down there in the chat if you think you know what the end goal is in any race. And then specifically about this race, the space race. It was a race towards what? Was it a race just to get up into space? Well, kind of, but that wasn't the end goal. That did not signify the end of the space race. If you were thinking the goal was to get to the moon, you are absolutely correct. And also, yeah, David, that is correct, to finish first. So if the goal of a race is to finish first, and the goal in this race was to get to the moon, then you needed to be the first country to get to the moon, okay? But what countries are we talking about? If you think you know that answer, again, put it down there in the chat. There were two important countries, two rivals, so it's kind of a race between two main contestants in the race, but other contestants or other countries were around to help. You're probably thinking that the United States was one of those countries. Yeah, okay, that's the easy one. What do you think was the country that we were racing with? Okay, David, you're going to say Russia and China. Well, you got it half right there. We were in that race with the Soviet Union. Okay, now basically referred to, there you go. Now basically referred to as Russia. Of course, it had a few more countries back then, and it was basically a different nation, so we're going to call it the Soviet Union. Okay. When did the space race begin? The space race began on October 4th, 1957, with the launch of this. Again, you know what I'm going to ask for. Okay, so if you know what this was called, or what it is, what kind of an object it was even, put it down there in the chat. Always like to make it as interactive as possible, guys. I will tell you, it was about the size of a beach ball. Kind of looks a little smaller than that in the picture, but it was about the size of a beach ball. It's got four things hanging off the end of it, four silver things. And I will tell you, it's silver and shiny here, but it wasn't like that for very long at all. Okay, if you're thinking this is a satellite, you would be absolutely correct. In fact, it was the world's first satellite put in orbit. Okay. And we're going to say man-made satellite because the moon is actually a satellite of the Earth. Okay, so this was the first ever man-made satellite to orbit the Earth. Okay, went around one time, and it was called Sputnik. Okay, Sputnik was the name of this. Now, a lot of things are going to happen as a result of the Soviet Union putting this in orbit around the planet. Number one is the United States is kind of going to be concerned and get a little scared because the Soviets seemed to be winning the race, right? They put the first man-made satellite in orbit and it was a success. So as a result of this, the United States is going to put their first man-made satellite in orbit around the Earth. And you know what I'm going to ask for. This one's a little harder though. So if you think you know what the name of this one was, put it down there in the chat. Okay, Frankly L, yes, Sputnik indeed. Sputnik indeed was the Russian one, the Soviet one, I should say. But what was the name of this one here, the one from the United States? I gotta admit, I kind of like at least just the shape of Sputnik a little bit better, right? But this one was like 7 feet tall. Okay, so it was a little bit bigger. It's got those what look like tentacles coming off the middle of it. This was called Explorer 1. Okay, Explorer 1 was the United States' first man-made satellite. Yeah, Vash, I'm kind of with you on that one. And frankly, you remember this. Fantastic. Okay, very good. Another result of this first kind of, leg of the space race, if you will, What's the formation of this? NASA. Okay, everybody knows what NASA means. Is the National Aeronautics and Space Administration. This is going to be formed in 1958. There's also going to be a couple of other things. The United States knows that they need to get going because the Soviets have a head start in this race. But on April 12th, 1961, this guy is launched into space. Okay, this is Soviet Air Force Lieutenant Yuri Gagarin. He becomes the first human being in space, but not only in space, but he's going to orbit the Earth one time. So he's going to be the first human being to orbit the planet. Everything was successful. Oh my goodness. Okay, another big step forward that the Soviets have made in the space race. So the United States really has to get going. Now, before this happened, though, back in the late 50s, the United States is going to form their first group of their first 7 astronauts. Okay, they're going to call them the Mercury 7 because Project Mercury had been decided as America's first manned space program. Okay, now take a look at these guys here. They are only posing out there in front of the U.S. Air Force jet, but these are Air Force, Navy, and there's actually one Marine in the group, pilots and test pilots. These guys are straight up the best pilots on the planet. So they're training as a result of all these steps that the Soviets taking, stepping forward in the race to eventually get to the moon is going to cause their training to be sped up a little bit. Okay. Now these guys are going to be working closely with this object. Okay. Again, let us know what you think that is. Vash, someone looks happy. Who do you think looked happy in that? They actually all looked happy in that picture to me. But this looks like maybe a big giant hand would reach down and maybe grab the left part of this object, maybe ring it like a bell. Maybe it's a big flashlight. What do you think this is? This was intricately involved in our first manned space program. Fantastic, Vash Sin. There you go. It's a space capsule. In fact, it was the Mercury capsule. Okay. This we're going to think of as really the first leg in this race. And as we go along, you're going to see that we had 3 distinct legs in the race. Okay. But at this point, when the United States enters the first leg of the race, the Soviets have a pretty big head start. Okay. What was Intrepid's role? Okay. Here are the Mercury 7 once again. And the astronaut that's going to go in that space capsule specifically that I showed you, if you come to the Intrepid, you could see that it is a replica. It's not the real thing, but it's a replica, which means it's the same size. Actually, let me go back to that picture while I'm talking about it. There you go. So you'll check this out on the hangar deck of the Intrepid Museum. So it's the exact size. How many astronauts you think were in this thing? Or how was it built for how many astronauts? Do you think it was 3? I know some missions had 3 astronauts. 2.5 astronauts. I wonder what your definition of a 0.5 of an astronaut would be, Vash. But you overshot the mark a little bit because there was only 1 astronaut in these Mercury capsules. Okay, now this capsule in particular is the Aurora 7. That's the name that the astronaut that served in this capsule gave it. The Aurora 7. And these are the Mercury 7, but which one you think was the astronaut that went in here? His name was Scott Carpenter. You got it, David. There was only 1 astronaut in here. Yep, there you go. That one guy all the way on the far right. Scott Carpenter is going to go into that Mercury capsule. Okay, now he is going to be the second one after John Glenn. He will be the second American to orbit the planet and the 3rd human being overall. He's going to do 3 complete orbits around the planet. It's going to take about 5 hours or so. But here's the thing, okay? The Intrepid, of course, is set to be the recovery vessel. That's why I'm building this up so much. The Intrepid is going to be the recovery vessel for this Mercury 7 mission. Now, stories do vary from a equipment failure, switching from computer control to manual control. Maybe Scott Carpenter got caught up in the beautiful sights and he was looking out the window for a little bit too long. Maybe he decided to switch to manual control a little bit early and kind of went joyriding a little bit. Like I said, stories vary, but whatever the account was, whatever the case was, he comes back in to the atmosphere. It's called a re-entry. He re-enters the atmosphere too late, and this results in him coming down 250 miles off target, right? 250 miles off target. So this capsule would eventually splash down, and you could see the Atlas Mercury rocket, or Mercury Atlas, I should say. If you look at the very picture on the right, you can see the capsule there, the black part at the top, and there's Scott getting ready for his mission. So where to come down? Do you come down in the water? Obviously you do. Maybe that's this picture I'm showing you is the clue. Because why do you want to come down in the water? And give me an indication in the chat if you know why a water splashdown, they called it, was preferable than a land landing or a landing on land. So if you land on land, you're not going to really have a splash. I mean, you probably kick off some dust and some sand, and you got it, a softer landing. Okay, this is the same reason why pilots in World War II, or not just in World War II, but aircraft pilots, when they bail out, they always wanted to bail out over water. Okay, it's a much easier landing than landing on land. You never know what you're going to come down in. Okay, but after you do land, and specifically when Scott Carpenter landed in the Mercury 7, 250 miles away from his target, okay, he needed somebody to go get him. Now, the Intrepid was that ship, the recovery vessel, but it took us a while. In fact, it's going to take us 3 hours to actually find him. And when we do find him, we're going to be able to pick up Scott Carpenter, like you see in the picture here, but we're not actually going to be able to pick up the capsule. That's going to be a destroyer that came along with the Intrepid to pick up the capsule, okay? But everything went fine. Whoops, slip of a finger there, guys. What we're going to do is I want to pause here and see if there's any questions. If you guys have any questions, just let me know. Any questions? So, okay, why was it called Project Mercury? Okay, good question. That's always an important one. So NASA really has this interest in naming things after Greek and sometimes Roman mythology as well. Okay, now if you are familiar with Greek mythology, maybe you learned it in school, maybe you're currently learning it in your first days of school here in early September, or maybe you will this year. It's a hobby of mine, and if you're familiar with Greek mythology, you'll realize that, well, you'll remember that Mercury was the messenger god. Okay. Now, in Greek mythology, he had a different name. Okay, his name was Ares. So he was the messenger god. He could run really fast. He's usually depicted with wings on his helmet, right? Sometimes winged sandals as well. He's usually depicted with those kind of things. But Roman mythology is usually preferred because, well, after all, Rome did conquer Greece, and so usually to the victors go the spoils. And so we're going to name this capsule and this project after the Roman name for the messenger god, which is Mercury. Okay. Also, Mercury is our closest planet to the sun, and as we know, if we study astronomy, the closer you are to the sun, the faster you are in orbit around the sun. Okay. So in recognition of the speed, another reason why we're going to name it Project Mercury. Okay, but that's a good question. Is there another question? Did Scott Carpenter leave the capsule when he was in space? No, this was a skill that we were going to have to learn eventually if we were to go to the moon and win the race to the moon. But no, we weren't at that point yet. So the Mercury program, I'm glad you asked this question. The Mercury program was all about learning basic skills. When we first were going up with these Mercury capsules, we didn't know much of anything. Okay, we weren't real sure if we were even going to be able to breathe in space. Were we going to be able to eat in space? Were we going to be able to sleep in space? Okay, so the Mercury program, leg one of the space race, you can think of as just learning the basic skills. Okay, and doing that by going up and down, or into space and right back down, not even going into orbit, or going into orbit. Okay, and learning those skills in orbit as well. Okay, so things like skills like doing spacewalks, that's going to come later in our second leg of the race. Great questions, guys. Okay, cool. Leg two of the race, and I kind of let it slip with a quick finger there last time, was the Gemini program. Okay, the Gemini program you could think of as leg two of that race. Okay, what kind of things are we going to look forward to accomplish in the Gemini program? So now that we've had all these basic skills accomplished with the Mercury program, we can move on to the skills that are really going to be necessary to get to the moon. So the Gemini program, all about getting to the moon. These guys here, these two astronauts, on the left is Gus Grissom, on the right is John Young. Okay, and those are going to be the two astronauts because, okay, Gemini is the twins. It means you yourself may be a Gemini, okay, a zodiac sign. It means twins. And so Gemini 3, the Gemini 3 mission had those two astronauts on board. One of the things we're going to do with the Gemini program is to learn about space food. Okay, what food is the best? What's the best way to package that food? Unfortunately, they're gonna worry about how well it tastes a little bit later on, not a little bit later on in the Gemini program, and even after that with Apollo. But here's a sampling real quick of some of that early space food. Okay, it's dehydrated, it's freeze dried, and vacuum sealed in those plastic bags right there. So food is going to start to be experimented with more and more as we go through the Gemini program. Okay, in this picture you have a chicken sandwich, believe it or not. You have cinnamon toasties, and look at these tubes up there on the top there that look like toothpaste. Those are actually tubes of orange juice. Imagine drinking your orange juice from a tube. Okay, now one of the major problems with eating in space and food in space in your capsule, well, picture yourself eating lunch. Okay, I just did it today, and I had a sandwich for lunch, and it had crumbs. You're inevitably going to get crumbs, and if you're eating lunch from your lap, like I tend to do, and you drop crumbs, where are they going to fall? Well, they're going to fall in your lap. Okay, because gravity is going to pull everything down. When you're in orbit, you're in something called microgravity, and you are equalizing the gravity on you. You don't have that downward tug of any crumbs that you might make when you bite into one of these things in the packages. So in order to keep crumbs from floating around your spacecraft and getting in all the, maybe getting in some of the equipment and maybe causing a dangerous situation, a lot of this stuff is going to be coated with like a gelatin or an oil, okay, to keep those crumbs, on the item of food itself. Okay. Today, astronauts make their own sandwiches. Like, for example, here's Peggy Whitson. Ooh, pardon me, Peggy Whitson in the International Space Station, and she calls this a hamburger. Look at this thing, guys, and tell me what you notice about it. Does it look like a hamburger to you? Let me know what you think of this in the chat. It is floating. Doesn't seem to be many crumbs coming off of it. A space burrito. Okay, kind of, sort of. Yeah, it more looks like a space burrito. Like, all she had to do is like roll it up and it would be kind of a space burrito. But this is actually a hamburger, and it's on a tortilla. Okay, so what astronauts do is they use tortillas in space because it's a lot less crumbs, a lot less crummy, if you will. Because again, using bread would just cause crumbs to be floating around all alongside this hamburger. Okay, I wonder if it tasted good. Kind of have my doubts about that one. Okay, so let's get back to Gemini 3. Right, the Gemini 3 mission is going to re-enter the atmosphere, and it's going to come down. It's going to be a lot easier to find. It's only 60 miles off course, and the Intrepid is the recovery vessel for this mission as well. Okay, 1965. And as you can see, yep, it does splash down. And this time, it's only going to take us a few minutes to find them. And we're actually going to be able to bring both the capsule and the 2 astronauts on board. Here you can see the divers that have jumped out of the helicopter and are in the ocean there. And they were able to get to the capsule, open up those doors, and check on the astronauts and make sure they're okay. And look at kind of the bottom of the picture there. You see that green substance coming out of the top. First of all, that's where the parachutes came out of. But when the parachutes were detached, the green dye came out. And what do you think that was for? Anybody have any idea what you think the green dye floating in the water was all about? You think, was it a leak of some kind, or you think it was intentionally done? Just let me know in the for visibility. Vasen, yes, you got it. Okay. It's so the helicopters could see it. Okay, you see a big green patch in the ocean, and you're pretty sure that the capsule is somewhere around there. Okay, so it made it a lot easier to find. So, like I said, they were able to pick up the capsule as well. And you can see that one of the cranes on the Intrepid picking up the Gemini 3 capsule and bringing it to our starboard side elevator. And if you come to the Intrepid today, you can see it still there. Now, this is a replica. Okay, it's not the real thing again, but you can see it still there on display, much like it was back in 1965 when the Intrepid was the recovery vessel for that as well. Okay, so I think we're going to take another question break here and see if there are any questions. Any questions, guys? What are other capsule programs named after Greek mythology? Okay, so my quick finger there kind of gave it away. Okay, so the next one, kind of the third leg in the race, and we'll talk about that after the question break, is Apollo. And so that is indeed a great example of another program that was named after a Greek god. Okay, Apollo. Now, this was the third and probably most important leg in the race. This is us actually going to the moon. And at this point, we are caught up and actually a little ahead of the Soviets. Okay, so we're going to name it not just any old god will do. It's got to be one of the major gods. Okay, and Apollo was a major god in both the Greek and Roman pantheons. Okay, he was the god of the sun, of music, and all those good things that we enjoy. So we also had other things, and we have programs actually coming up like very soon. Or right now, NASA is testing the Orion capsule, okay, named after a famous hunter from mythology as well. So Orion will be the capsule that will take astronauts once again to the moon, hopefully by 2024, and to the red planet of Mars sometime in the 2030s. Okay, so those are just a few examples of other programs that, and we're still keeping that emphasis on Greek and Roman mythology. Good question. Do they eat better food in space now? I gotta say, yeah, they actually do. Okay, so one of the things that we've been able to do steadily is improve. Okay, improve the food, not just the quality, but the taste as well. Okay, and nutritionally too. Okay, so now, if you're like Peggy Whitson, an astronaut serving aboard the ISS, you can make your own sandwiches on tortillas. You can make your hamburger if you like, or you can try and roll it up like a burrito. They're even growing food now in the International Space Station. Okay, they've grown scallions, they've grown lettuce. Let's see, the latest, chili peppers. Okay, they've grown chili peppers, and that's actually important because in microgravity, there is you tend a lot of different effects, and one of them that could be detrimental is fluids in your body. Fluid shift. It tends to pool up in certain areas, and including right behind your eyes. And this could have an effect on your eye shape. It could actually distort the shape of your eyes, and actually can make you go blind if you're up there enough and don't take the proper precautions. But if you've ever had a cold, you'll know that you probably get all stuffed up. And when you get all stuffed up, you don't taste very well, do you? So same thing happens. The astronauts tend to get stuffed up. And so the food that they're eating tends to be rather tasteless. So they've gravitated towards eating more spicy foods because that tends to cut through it and drain a little bit of the fluid. And you can taste it a little bit better. So chili peppers were very welcome especially fresh chili peppers that they grew. Let's see. They've experimented recently with a cookie oven. Okay, a cookie oven was brought to the ISS, and what you're going to do is, of course, bake cookies. Now they had to experiment with this. Don't get too excited. The cookies, it took them a while to kind of get it straight, and it actually took over an hour to cook. So even though the cookies may not have tasted great, I'm sure it smelled very nice in the capsule that they were. Okay, good questions. Let's go, like I said, to our third leg in the race, and that is, of course, Apollo. And at this point, like I said, we're ahead of the Soviets, and we're actually going to the moon. The most famous astronauts on Apollo are these guys right here. From left to right, we have Neil Armstrong. The guy in the middle is Michael Collins, and of course, Edwin Buzz Aldrin on the far right. Okay, these guys are going to make the first ever moon landing. Michael Collins will remain in the command module in orbit around the moon, just to take Neil and Buzz home when they were ready. Very, very important. Okay. So with this landing, guess what, guys? We won a race. Okay. The Soviets have yet to come anywhere near the race. The Russians are talking about it. Every once in a while you hear about a plan for a Russian mission to the moon, but they're nowhere near ready, and the race has already been won. In fact, we'll probably be back there with our astronauts before they make their first landing on the moon as well. I do want to show you this video here. Okay, this is all about, remember we talked about complications in space. Okay, let's imagine, if you will, you're floating around, you're on your way to the moon in a capsule, and a hole rips in the side of your capsule. You get sucked down into space. Oh my goodness. What would you do? Do you think you would take a big breath in, so this way you could have a few seconds more of air? Would it be best to breathe out and exit all the air from your lungs? What do you guys think? Put it down in the chat there. Hopefully you're not going to die, Vashsin. Someone's going to pull you in before you die. Don't worry. Do you think it's better to take a big deep breath so you'll have some air in your lungs to use? Or do you think you should breathe out? Okay, Frankly L says breathe out. Okay, let's check out this video here, and I'll put it wide on the screen. Now, in this demonstration, we have a bell jar. Okay, the bell jar is connected to a hose. See that hose there on the bottom there? That hose is going to suck out the air, so we can create a vacuum inside there, and we can test different substances and different things. Inside this bell jar is a little jar of water there, and you can see, I'll tell you, full disclosure, the water is at room temperature. The water is not hot. And as you can see, there's nothing on the bottom of the jar there. It's firmly placed on the table. My next question, guys, what do you think is going to happen to that water if we suck all the air out? Is nothing going to happen? Maybe nothing will happen. Do you think the water will spill out of the jar? What exactly? Put it down there in the chat what you think. Oh, there we go. We're going to take that water out. We got a better look out for that from that direction there. Those are bubbles. Those are air bubbles. Okay, the water's boiling. Now, the way we know how to boil water is you add heat. Okay, you add heat and energy into that liquid, and you'll get that boiling effect. But there's another way to boil water, or really liquids like it, and that would be to take the air out from around it. Okay, and put it in a vacuum. So there you have our boiling water there. So while you have been sucked out of that hole in your capsule, okay, if you breathe in and get your lungs full of air, you're in our next presentation. We're going to show you what's going to happen there, but you're going to find that the fluids and the liquids in your body, for example, you're going to feel tingling sensations on your tongue as the saliva in your mouth starts to boil away. And the sweat from your skin will dry out. You're going to be pretty dry. But okay, and my apologies. It took us a while to get to the lung demonstration. Here we have two balloons. We have a red balloon, and you see there's some air in that balloon. Okay, that's going to represent our lungs when we take a deep breath. right? Like some of you have said here in the chat. Yeah, I saw a couple of you out there. And the blue one is going to represent lungs that we have exhaled fully. Okay, now technically there is a little bit of air in that balloon. We couldn't get the whole thing out, but it's a good representation. Okay, so let's put those balloons back up on the platform there. Close the bell jar. Let's see what happens when you suck the air out. Attach the hose, turn it on. And as you guys watch, let me know in the chat what you see happening here. What's happening? I can see something happen to that red balloon right there. But the blue balloon, not much is happening to that one. Yep, the red is swelling up. You got it, Frank Liel. Okay, so if you take a deep breath when you get sucked, just before you get sucked out of that capsule, your lungs are going to have all that air in it, and plus they're going to expand even further. So that could damage your lungs. Okay, so imagine eventually that balloon's going to pop. So if you can imagine your lungs popping, that is a danger that you have. So of course the correct answer here would be to exhale all the air out of your lungs. Okay, and look at that blue balloon. Well, like I said, it had a little bit of air in it, so it swelled up a little bit, but certainly no big deal. And then of course you take the hose out and everything goes flying around the bell jar. It's kind of fun. All right, very cool. So now that we know some of the dangers of space flight, we've already talked about the United States winning the war in the third leg, which was Apollo. In 1972, they decided that we're going to end the Apollo program, and we're going to concentrate more on operating in what we call near Earth orbit. That's the space up to around 500 miles or so from the surface of the Earth. And we're going to concentrate on trying to make a reusable spacecraft. Okay, so if you guys think you know what this is, put it down there in the chat. If you come to the Intrepid, you can see this object, this craft. What do you guys think that is? What's that called? If you look real closely on the side there, it's even named. It's named the Enterprise. Yes, kind of like the Starship Enterprise, after which it was ultimately named. If you think you know what that is, space, it is space. Yeah, there you go, Space Shuttle. Fantastic. This is the Space Shuttle Enterprise. Okay. Now, the Enterprise was the prototype. Okay. It made it possible for all the other ones that came after it, all the other 5, to go into orbit, into space, although the Enterprise never went into space itself. But the Enterprise was nonetheless important. It was very, very important. And we like to take baby steps in this, in hitting our goals. So part of that important baby step, baby steps was the Enterprise right there. So the other 6 orbiters are going to make a total of 135 missions. Okay, 135 missions all total. The Enterprise, I'm sorry, the Space Shuttle program, again, was never designed to bring passengers into space. Think of it as a big space cargo truck. It's going to bring big, expensive, and heavy equipment in its payload bay or cargo bay from the surface of the Earth up into space. It was designed to blast off like a rocket, like you see happening here, and ultimately glide through the air like a plane and land on a runway. Okay, just like an aircraft does. Okay. The Enterprise in particular was very important in aerial testing. Okay, it's going to have 8 missions where it goes up on the back of a 747. The first 3 missions, it's going to remain on the back of that 747, and we're going to have a 2-man crew on the Enterprise during each of these 8 missions. But the last 5 missions, it's going to do this. It's going to come up off the 747, and it's going to fly or glide to a landing. Okay, these are called approach and landing tests. Okay? Very, very important what the Enterprise did. The Enterprise will be retired in 1982. After it was retired, it's going to go on a worldwide tour. It's going to go to places like London. It's going to go to the Paris Air Show. It's going to be the main exhibit at the New Orleans World's Fair in 1984. It's actually going to be brought out of retirement once again in 2003 to be involved in the investigation as to what happened to the Columbia accident. Okay, if those of you who are old enough to remember that incident. But in 2012, it became available. Now, see, it was down in the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C., but the Smithsonian was able to acquire the Discovery, okay, and that was a space-worthy orbiter. So the Enterprise became available, and the Intrepid was able to win the bidding process and won the right to house the Enterprise. But how did they get it there? So they're going to take the Enterprise on a crane. They're going to crane it onto the back of a 747 down in Washington. They're going to fly it up here to New York, and before it lands, it's going to do this tour around the island of Manhattan. Maybe some of you who are watching may have seen it through your office window. I get that with visitors to the Intrepid all the time. I saw this on TV. I remember I was really sick with a cold that day. Couldn't actually go out to see it flying anywhere, but watched it on, I think it was CNN. It's going to do a lap around the island of Manhattan before landing at JFK Airport. After it lands, they're going to use a crane once again to put it on a barge. That barge will sail up the Hudson River. It's going to park right next to the Intrepid. And then the world's largest seaborne crane is going to take it off of the, there's my finger again, is going to take it off of the barge, put it on the flight deck of the Intrepid, and we're going to build a building that you're going to see when you come to the Intrepid to visit it, or that you have seen, or around it while it was there. And it remains one of our most popular attractions today. So the shuttle program was ended in 2011. July 21st, 2011 is going to be the last flight. That would be the Atlantis. But what do we do after that? And why was it ended? Well, it was getting rather costly, $206 billion. Okay, and that's like in 80s dollars, that figure. So they decided we're going to end the program. But how are we going to get into space if the United States had nowhere else, no other way to get into space? Well, as you might have seen here, we're going to hitch a ride with our former Cold War adversaries, the Russians. Okay, they were the Soviets back then. In their rocket here, this is a Soyuz rocket. We're going to partner with them to go into space now. Okay, the Soyuz is going to put this spacecraft into orbit. Now, the part here on the left is the orbital module, and that is where up to 3 astronauts, much like Apollo, will take the ride into orbit. The service module is here in white, and that's the electronics, things like the CO2 scrubber and things like that. They're going to dock at the ISS, the International Space Station. They're going to get out, and a crew who has reached the end of their stint on the station, a crew of 3 is going to get in. They're going to crawl through the orbital module to the middle section here. The middle section is the reentry module. They're going to detach from the space station. They're going to get back into orbit. The orbital module and the service module are going to come away, and they're going to burn up in the atmosphere. But the reentry module has a heat shield on it. That's what's going to protect those astronauts. And if you come to the Intrepid, you can see a space-flown Soyuz reentry module right there. And if it looks kind of charred, you're absolutely correct, right? Because the heat shield has been burned off in it, right? Okay, so definitely make your way. And there are the 3 astronauts, or there's an example of 3 astronauts that were in the reentry module, okay? Looks like Chris Hadfield here on the right, a Canadian astronaut, a Russian astronaut, and an American astronaut. I'm not sure who those are, but they are all smiling, so they must have had a good experience, Now, what they do is when they come in for a landing, it's going to be rather different than all 3 legs that we've discussed, okay? The Mercury program, the Gemini program, and Apollo, because we're going to come down over land now, okay? All the Russian programs come down over the desert in Kazakhstan. You got a series of parachutes that are going to open up. They're going to slow your descent. And then when you get to about 1 meter, that's all, about 1 meter off the desert floor, you have rockets underneath that are going to fire. They're going to slow you down to a nice, soft, cushiony landing on the desert sand? No, not really. I'm told it's still quite jarring. But don't worry, those astronauts that you saw all nicely packed in there, there's memory foam on their seats, and so they're going to be okay ultimately. Okay, so this is how we're putting people into space, American astronauts partnering with the Russians. Of course, now you have private companies like SpaceX and Boeing that are American companies that are lifting astronauts into space now. So we won't need to partner with the Russians for too much more. What are we going to do in the future? Let's talk a little bit. I did mention we're going to go back into the moon, hopefully by 2024. And this is how we're going to do it with a program called the Artemis Program. Another Greek god, okay? So Apollo, a major god in the Greek mythos, he had a twin sister, and that twin sister's name was Artemis. And there was a decidedly female bent given to the Artemis Program, not just because it was named after a goddess, because when we go back to the moon, again, God willing, in 2024, there will be 4 astronauts, and at least one of them, will be a woman. At least one will be a person of color. So when that happens, along with the man on the moon, we'll have the woman on the moon and a first person of color on the moon. And they might not all be American astronauts either, the crew that makes that landing. After the Artemis program, we can talk about going to the red planet of Mars, with the Orion capsule as well, okay, because it will be the Orion that will take us to both areas. Guys, I do want to thank you guys so much for listening and tuning in once again on what I like to call Jim's Journey to Space, and learning a little bit about some of the artifacts that the Intrepid Museum has, and some of the things you can definitely see. Please, if you are able, click the link in the chat and you'll be able to give a review of the program. Let us know what you thought of the program today. And definitely, absolutely let us know if you're going to be coming to the Intrepid anytime soon. Tune in again next Thursday on another live Intrepid virtual adventure. Bye, guys.